News story this morning is showbiz death. One of the most popular singers of the late 50s and early 60s.
It's March 15th, 2024, and Connie Francis, America's sweetheart of the 1960s, has just passed away at age 85. Within hours, her family is racing to her Florida estate, but they're not there to grieve. They're there to destroy evidence. What they didn't know is that Connie Francis had been planning this moment for 20 years. She knew exactly what would happen when she died, and she'd prepared for it. Hidden throughout her home were documents, recordings, and digital files that would expose secrets so devastating they would destroy everything the world thought it knew about her life. See, Connie Francis wasn't just the innocent girl next door who sang "Where the Boys Are." She was a woman who'd been trapped, exploited, and betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. And in her final years, she'd become something else entirely. A detective, investigating her own life, building a case against everyone who'd wronged her. The woman who died that day had spent decades living behind a carefully constructed facade. To the public, she was the tragic figure who'd overcome a brutal assault in 1974 and battled mental health issues with dignity. She was the veteran performer who'd gracefully accepted her place in music history, appearing at oldies concerts and casino shows with a smile. But that wasn't the real Connie Francis. The real Connie Francis was furious. Her estate lawyer, a man named David Kellerman, who'd been secretly working with her for 5 years, knew what was coming. He'd helped her prepare for this day, helped her organize the evidence, helped her plan how the truth would finally come out. And when the family showed up demanding immediate access to her personal papers, Kellerman was ready for them. "I'm sorry," he told them, but Mrs. Francis left very specific instructions. Nothing gets touched until the full estate review is complete. That's when the panic started. Her brother Georgie, who'd managed her finances for decades, started demanding to know what papers Connie had. Her nephew Joey, who'd been handling her bookings, wanted access to her business files. Even her closest friends seemed nervous about what might be found. Because here's what nobody understood about Connie Francis in her final years. She'd stopped trusting everyone. Every conversation was potentially recorded. Every business meeting was documented. Every financial transaction was tracked. She'd become paranoid, they thought. But she wasn't paranoid. She was preparing. The first bombshell came within 48 hours. Kellerman found the safe behind her bedroom mirror, the one nobody knew existed. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, each marked with a different year: 1974, 1985, and 2003. Each envelope contained evidence of betrayals so profound that they would rewrite the entire story of Connie Francis's life.
But it was the digital files that really scared everyone. Connie had learned to use modern technology in ways that shocked people who thought she was just a sweet old lady stuck in the past. She had encrypted drives, cloud storage accounts under false names, and a sophisticated recording setup that she'd used to document conversations for years. The family tried everything to gain control of the evidence. They claimed she'd been mentally incompetent. They argued that her paranoia had led her to create false narratives. They even suggested that outsiders had manipulated her in her final years. But Kellerman had prepared for that too. He had medical records proving Connie's mental competence right up until her death. He had video statements she'd made explaining her actions. And most importantly, he had corroborating evidence for every single claim she'd made. The truth was, Connie Francis had spent the last 2 decades of her life uncovering a conspiracy that reached back to the very beginning of her career. She'd discovered that almost everyone she'd trusted had been lying to her, stealing from her, or manipulating her. And she decided that death would be her moment of revenge. What the family found in those first few days was just the beginning. There were 3 major secrets that would emerge from Connie Francis's carefully preserved evidence. 3 revelations that would show the world that America's sweetheart had actually lived through hell on earth. The first secret would connect her to dangerous criminals who'd controlled her career for decades. The second would reveal a family betrayal so devastating it would make national headlines. And the third would expose a cover-up that reached into the highest levels of the entertainment industry. But before we dive into those secrets, you need to understand something about Connie Francis. She didn't just stumble onto this evidence. She'd been hunting for it, piece by piece, for 20 years. She'd hired private investigators, tracked down witnesses, and built a case that would have impressed federal prosecutors.
The woman who died in March 2024 wasn't the broken victim that people remembered. She was a warrior who'd been planning her final battle for 2 decades. And now, from beyond the grave, Connie Francis was about to win. The first envelope that lawyer David Kellerman opened was marked 1974, the year that changed everything for Connie Francis. Everyone knew the official story. She'd been brutally assaulted at a Howard Johnson's motel in Westbury, New York after a performance. The attack left her traumatized, derailed her comeback plans, and sent her into years of therapy and legal battles. But what nobody knew was that the assault wasn't random. It was a message.
Inside that envelope were photographs, phone records, and handwritten notes that told a completely different story. Connie Francis hadn't just been dating musicians and actors in the early 1970s. She'd been romantically involved with Vincent "Vinny the Fish" Torino, a mid-level enforcer for the Genovese crime family who controlled much of the entertainment business in New York and New Jersey. The relationship had started innocently enough. Vinny had been hired to provide security for some of her casino appearances in Atlantic City. He was charming, protective, and unlike the Hollywood phonies she was used to dealing with. What she didn't realize was that Vinny wasn't just protecting her from overzealous fans. He was making sure she stayed in line with his boss's business interests. See, by 1973, organized crime had their fingers in every aspect of the entertainment industry. They controlled the venues, influenced the booking agents, and had relationships with record executives that went back decades. And Connie Francis, with her massive catalog and ongoing earning potential, represented a very valuable asset that needed to be managed. The problem was, Connie was getting ideas about artistic independence. She wanted to choose her own songs, book her own venues, maybe even start her own record label. These weren't the kinds of decisions that a mob-controlled asset was supposed to make unilaterally. So when she started talking about breaking away from certain business relationships, people got nervous. Vinny tried to handle it quietly. He explained the realities of the business to her, how certain people needed to be kept happy, how certain percentages needed to be paid. But Connie Francis in 1973 was still the feisty girl from Newark who'd fought her way to the top of the music business. She didn't respond well to threats, even gentle ones from someone she was sleeping with. That's when the letters started arriving. Anonymous notes warning her to be smart about her business decisions. Phone calls in the middle of the night with voices telling her to stick with what works. Her car was vandalized outside a restaurant in Little Italy. Small things, but the message was clear. The breaking point came when Connie discovered that Vinny had been reporting her conversations back to his superiors. She found a recording device in her hotel room after a weekend they'd spent together in the Catskills. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he tried to explain that he was protecting her, that knowing what she was thinking helped him keep his bosses from taking more drastic action. That's when Connie Francis made the biggest mistake of her life. She told Vinny she was going to expose everything. She was going to hold a press conference and reveal how the mob was controlling the entertainment industry. She had names, dates, financial records. She was going to bring down the whole system. Vinny begged her to reconsider. He explained what would happen if she went public, how dangerous his associates could be. But Connie Francis had spent her career standing up to bullies, from record executives to abusive managers. She wasn't about to back down from a bunch of criminals. 2 weeks later, she was brutally assaulted in that Howard Johnson's motel room. Here's what the police report didn't say. The attacker knew exactly which room she was in, despite her checking in under a false name. He had a key to her room, not a picked lock or forced entry. And the beating followed a very specific pattern, designed to cause maximum trauma without permanent physical disfigurement that would end her ability to perform. The assault wasn't random violence. It was a professional job carried out by someone who understood exactly how to break a person's spirit without destroying their earning potential. But the most chilling detail was in Connie's own handwritten notes, discovered decades later in that sealed envelope. 3 days before the assault, she'd received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, almost friendly. "Connie," the voice had said, "we tried to do this the easy way."
We hope you understand that what happens next is your choice. The attack worked exactly as intended. Connie Francis never held her press conference. She never exposed the mob's control over the entertainment industry. Instead, she spent years in therapy, struggling with trauma and paranoia that everyone assumed was just the natural result of a random violent crime. But it wasn't paranoia. They really were watching her, controlling her, making sure she stayed in line. Every booking, every recording contract, every business decision went through channels that led back to the same people who had ordered her beaten. And for 50 years, Connie Francis kept that secret, knowing that speaking out would likely get her killed. But she also kept the evidence, waiting for the right moment to finally tell the truth. That moment had finally come. The second envelope that lawyer David Kellerman opened was marked 1985, and what he found inside would have destroyed most people. But for Connie Francis, discovering that her own family had been systematically stealing from her for decades was just the beginning of a betrayal so deep it would take her 20 years to fully understand its scope. The envelope contained bank records, forged documents, and a handwritten journal that Connie had started keeping after she began to suspect something was wrong. The first entry was dated March 3, 1985, and it simply read, "Georgie lied about the Miami property. I need to find out what else he's lying about."
Her brother, George Francanero Jr., Georgie, to everyone who knew him, had been managing Connie's finances since 1978. He'd stepped in after her assault and subsequent breakdown, presenting himself as the stable, trustworthy family member who could handle the business side of things while she focused on her recovery. Everyone thought it was beautiful, the way her big brother was protecting his vulnerable sister. But Georgie wasn't protecting Connie. He was robbing her blind. It started small, the way these things always do. A few $1,000s here and there for business expenses that were actually personal purchases. Inflated bills from vendors who were giving him kickbacks. Property deals where he was secretly getting a cut from both sides of the transaction. Nothing dramatic enough to notice if you weren't looking closely, but steady enough to add up to serious money over time. The problem for Georgie was that Connie Francis wasn't as broken as he thought she was. Yes, she was dealing with trauma from the assault. Yes, she was struggling with depression and anxiety. But her mind was sharp, and she'd spent her entire career dealing with people who tried to take advantage of her. She knew what financial manipulation looked like. The first red flag was a property in Miami that Georgie claimed had been sold at a loss in 1983. Connie had always been meticulous about her real estate investments, and something about the sale didn't make sense to her. So she hired a private investigator to look into it, telling him she was considering buying the property back. What the investigator found was shocking. The property hadn't been sold at a loss at all. It had been sold for a substantial profit, but the money had been deposited into an account that Georgie controlled. He'd simply lied to Connie about the sale price and pocketed the difference. That's when Connie realized she was dealing with something much bigger than a simple mistake or oversight. Her own brother was stealing from her, and he'd been doing it for years. But the real heartbreak came when she discovered how deep the conspiracy went. It wasn't just Georgie. Her nephew, Joey, who'd been handling her bookings, was inflating expenses and skimming money from performance fees. Her sister-in-law, Marie, who helped with her fan mail and merchandising, was selling autographed photos and keeping the proceeds. Even her accountant, a family friend who'd been recommended by Georgie, was part of the scheme. The family that had stolen her fortune and exploited her trauma was about to learn that Connie Francis never forgot a betrayal, and she never forgave one either. The third envelope was marked 2003, the year Connie Francis stopped being a victim and became something far more dangerous. Inside were audio recordings, video files, and a detailed plan that would have impressed FBI agents. This wasn't just evidence of what had been done to her. This was her blueprint for revenge. For 20 years, from 2003 until her death, Connie Francis had been living a double life. To the outside world, she was the aging pop star making occasional appearances and dealing with her health issues. But in reality, she was running the most sophisticated sting operation in entertainment history,
targeting everyone who had wronged her. The recordings were the crown jewel of her evidence collection. Starting in 2003, Connie had been secretly recording every conversation with her family members, her business associates, and anyone connected to her financial affairs. She'd installed hidden microphones throughout her home, wore recording devices to meetings, and even had her phone calls automatically recorded to encrypted digital files. But these weren't just random recordings hoping to catch someone in a lie. Connie had become a master manipulator, carefully steering conversations to get people to admit their crimes on tape. She'd ask innocent questions about old business deals, then sit back and let people incriminate themselves as they tried to explain away obvious irregularities. The most devastating recording was from Christmas dinner 2008. Georgie, feeling comfortable among family, had actually bragged about how easy it had been to fool Connie about her finances in the 1980s and 1990s. He joked about the fake medical treatments, laughed about the inflated expenses, and even admitted that he'd been planning to have her declared incompetent since 1995. The beauty of it, Georgie said on the recording, not knowing his sister was capturing every word, is that she trusted us completely. She never questioned anything because we were family. We could have taken everything if we'd been a little more careful. But the recordings were just the beginning. Connie had also been secretly working with forensic accountants and private investigators to trace every dollar that had been stolen from her. She'd hired cybersecurity experts to recover deleted financial records from old computer systems. She'd even convinced some of the doctors and vendors who'd been part of the conspiracy to cooperate with her investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution.
By 2010, Connie Francis had assembled a case that included over 200 hours of recorded conversations, thousands of pages of financial documents, and testimony from dozens of witnesses. It was an airtight, prosecution-ready case that could have sent multiple people to prison for decades. So why didn't she use it while she was alive? Because Connie Francis understood something that most people don't. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is the one that comes from beyond the grave. She knew that if she exposed everything while she was alive, her family would deny it, claim she was mentally unstable, and tie everything up in legal battles for years. They'd use her age and her history of mental health struggles to discredit her evidence. They'd turn her into the villain, the paranoid old woman making false accusations against her loving family. But if the evidence came out after her death, everything would be different. Dead people can't be cross-examined. They can't be portrayed as vindictive or unstable. The evidence would speak for itself, and her family would have no one to attack except the truth itself. The final piece of Connie's plan was perhaps the most brilliant. She'd arranged for copies of all her evidence to be sent to multiple journalists, law enforcement agencies, and legal authorities immediately upon her death. Not just the financial crimes, but everything. The mob connections, the family betrayals, the cover-ups that had protected everyone who'd wronged her. But she'd also included something else in those packages, a detailed confession of her own deception. She admitted to the secret recordings, acknowledged that she'd been misleading people for years, and explained exactly why she'd chosen to reveal the truth only after her death. "I spent the last 20 years of my life pretending to be weak so that the people who hurt me would feel safe," she said in her final video statement. "They thought I was broken, that I'd never fight back. They were wrong. I was gathering evidence, building my case, and waiting for the perfect moment to destroy them all." The legal consequences were immediate and devastating. Federal prosecutors opened criminal investigations into the financial crimes. The IRS began auditing everyone connected to Connie's business affairs. Civil lawsuits were filed, seeking to recover millions in stolen assets. But perhaps most importantly, Connie Francis had achieved something that seemed impossible. She'd taken back control of her own story. For 50 years, she'd been defined by what had been done to her. Now, in death, she was defined by what she'd done to them.
The entertainment industry's most beloved victim had become its most brilliant predator. And from beyond the grave, Connie Francis had finally won.
This is just the beginning of what Connie's evidence revealed about industry exploitation. What other celebrities do you think have similar secrets? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more shocking celebrity exposés that the industry tried to bury, hit that subscribe button right now.